Hey guys, welcome back. If you've been watching all of my end of year content, I'm literally wearing the same outfit because I'm literally filming all these videos in like one shot. Sorry, not sorry. It just works best for me this way. My kids are actually home right now, they're upstairs, but they're being pretty quiet right now. But if you do hear something going on in the background, that's what's going on. They're home early today and they'll be home early tomorrow because they had their midterms. Yep, short days. Anyways, this year I had set out to read books that I really enjoyed and not waste time, not invest time into books that just weren't going to work for me. And really try hard not to get caught up in what everyone else is reading and everyone else likes this book. How come I don't? I must try to finish reading it. It'll get better. All of those thoughts I was not going to do to myself this year. And I did a pretty good job. And I really like looking back at all the books that I didn't finish, that I didn't like. So I actually, on my Goodreads shelves, I actually set a non-shareable shelf called for DNF books. So every book that I attempted to read that I didn't finish, I just put it in there and it doesn't save it to any of my other shelves. It's all by its lonesome. So yeah, if you want to do that for yourself, that you can do that. It does show up on your main shelves though, next to like currently reading and stuff. So I could kind of see it kind of cluttering up your shelves, but I still really liked that I did that. And I also tried leaving reviews for some of these books, not star ratings at all, but I did try to put some thoughts in there why it didn't work for me. So some of these books that I will mention, I have gone back into Goodreads and shared my initial thoughts because some of them I didn't even remember that I tried to read, or I don't remember anything about them. So when I go back and I look at the notes that I left, I was like, oh, okay, now it's coming back to me. Just to kind of keep things simple, I just shared what I wrote on Goodreads, and I'll tell you when those instances are. I just think that it's important to also understand the books that you don't like, because I think that it does help you grow as a reader in really narrowing in what books are going to be the best for you by analyzing your favorite books and even analyzing your least favorite books. Whether you're a reader or a writer, it just really hones in what makes a book good for you. I've also been noticing other trends, for instance, like newly published books or books that have been published in the last few years. It feels, now, I don't know, I have to go back and look at my numbers. One second, I think I actually put it down here. Yeah, so at least 10 of these books were newly published, and it felt like there was a lot more than that, but there was only 10 of the 44 books that I want to say total that I have now DNF'd. And I think that because it feels like all the new books I keep picking up that I don't like them, that has been a big reason why in 2025 I want to kind of go back in time and read more classic books, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's also kind of interesting. You know, they are through different eras, there's different trends, and a lot of them are like political leaning books, or there's a societal trend that that authors try to lean into, and you'll see these like waves in literature through what is like, you know, trending or whatever. And I just think that is so interesting to see. But something else that I think probably negatively, I don't know if it's negative or positive, but with technology and the ability to self-publish, I think presents a lot of other issues in publishing regarding like the bottom line and shortage of editors. It just seems like some of the cracks are showing, and there's a lot of books that are being published because they know how to market them and they don't necessarily spend a lot of time in editing them. And so for me, a lot of the newly published books I'm not loving very much. So this is actually a pretty extensive list. You might want to grab some water or a snack. They're in no particular order, but I do kind of want to know what y'all think. If there are books on this list that you liked or you agree with me, what have you, I don't care. I just think that it's really interesting to open up discussions. Also, I am sorry if you are offended by any of the opinions that I have about these books. It is what it is. I actually haven't received too incredibly much animosity for my negative opinions on books in the past, but I suppose there's a first time for everything. So let's just go ahead and get into it. The first one on this list is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I had read A Man Called Ove, and I loved that book so much, so I thought I wanted to read everything that this man published, and Anxious People came into my possession, and I feel like I am the only one in the universe who didn't care for this. And I really wish that I could explain why, but I felt mostly it was just boring. And in a way, now bear with me because you're probably not going to see the relation at first, but I can't help but think about another book called Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. In Bel Canto, the author orchestrates this thrilling crime to tell a love story essentially, but then the crime was kind of lame and it didn't really make sense after a while, and it was just an excuse to tell this other story. And the summary kind of feels kind of the same, like it's just setting up this similar scenario. But yeah, ultimately it was boring. I didn't like it. The next one is Apocalypse Taco, which was a graphic novel. It sounds ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. I think I had just been on a graphic novel kick and I was picking up a bunch of ones, and it looked really cute and colorful. Obviously it was for kids, not meant to be taken seriously, but to be honest, it was a little bit too young for me and a little bit too silly, and I just could not get into it. I think that maybe it was more suited for my son Aaron. He's 13, but that was all. It was just aimed at the wrong age group. I have 2 books by the same author, Leanne Moriarty. I might have spelled her name wrong, to be fair, in my notes. But there's 2 books, Apples Never Fall, and Big Little Lies. In general, this is not the usual genre that I read from to begin with, but in both of these, I just kind of felt I couldn't connect to the characters. I didn't really care about their lives very much from the get-go, and so therefore it became boring. It felt very long, like there was just this whole long explanation of everything that they're doing in their lives and their family, and when you just don't care about the characters, you just don't care what they're doing, and they didn't really give me a reason to keep reading, I suppose. These are epic family sagas that kind of go generational. I think that's what it's supposed to be. They're generational family sagas, and I just found that I just didn't have patience for it, so I am a little bit disappointed. I feel like maybe I'm missing an opportunity, especially when it comes to Big Little Lies. Big Little Lies is a little bit more different stakes because there's supposedly all these scandals and family secrets, and that I wanted to know what those were because I do like that within stories, family secrets and stuff, but the setup was just so long that I was like, by the time I get there, I'm just not even gonna care anymore, and so that was kind of unfortunate feeling. I do still kind of want to know what's going on there, but I'm kind of relieved that there is actually a mini series, so I think I'm just gonna skip this read and go straight and watch the mini series. And it might be that I watch the mini series and fall in love with it, that I want to go back and read the books, and that would be completely valid, because I feel like in those instances, like maybe you finally get connected to the characters that you want to know all about their lives. Okay, the next one is Assistant to the Villain. This one was so popular. It just exploded this past year, and I honestly cannot see why. I couldn't even really remember what this was about exactly, but I recall it being pretty insufferable. I feel like it had something to do with the characters being insufferable, the writing not being great. So I looked back to see what I put on Goodreads, and what I wrote was, wow, DNF 3%. Wow, that's really not much of a chance. DNF'd at 3%. I know that's hardly a chance, but I'm already so annoyed by the characters' insta-love, and dialogue is awkward. Especially this conversation they're carrying on with while running and being shot at. The utilization of adding actions in dialogue to illustrate actions and cliche similes. Okay, that makes sense. The next one I DNF'd was The Beloved Wild. This was part of a Read It or Unhaul It challenge, and it was frankly just boring, plain and simple. Black Ice by Becca Fitzpatrick also was part of a Read It or Unhaul It challenge, and I'll be honest, it's not bad writing. It even had a pretty strong start, but as I started to get into it and kind of consider where the story was going, I really just lost interest in the plot. That doesn't mean that it's a bad book by any means, but just not the right story for me. It is considered like a mystery thriller, I believe, which again is just kind of not the right genre for me to begin with. Like, I have to really, really be in the mood or be really interested in the story dynamic to get into a mystery thriller, and this just wasn't it. All right, Circe by Madeline Miller. Again, this book is incredibly popular, and I think that I am the only one in the universe who doesn't like it, but it's really just not for me. I I just didn't care enough about Cersei. I thought that the stories of the gods were just so weird and so out there. They're so bizarre, and their choices are just ridiculous. Accuracy or not, I know that obviously we're not trying to tell a great story, we're just retelling the stories of Greek mythology, and I just didn't care. I don't think that Greek mythology is really where it's at for me to begin with. That's not to say that there aren't some Greek mythologies that I have enjoyed. I have really enjoyed Pat Barker's story about the women. Oh my god, I can't think of what it's called. City of Girls? No, not City of Girls. I forgot what it's called, but it was written by Pat Barker. And then also Song of Achilles, I thought was really good. But Cersei, I mean, I really thought that of all the Greek myth books that this one would work for me, because she is a witch and she gets like secluded on an island and stuff like that. But I felt that it just started taking way too long to get to the point, and yeah, it's just weird. The next one is A Dark and Drowning Tide, and I never quite finished this. I honestly don't even know why. I just found myself dreading to pick it up, and it just felt like a chore. It's really not a bad book. In fact, it started out really strong. I can see why people really liked this book. This is the second Alison Saft book that I read, and they feel very atmospheric and very whimsical, but there is something about... I don't know, just something about it. I think this one is actually stronger than the other one that I had picked up. At the beginning, I really liked the dynamic, the competing pair. It's kind of like a setting up for a rivals scenario of the main characters, and then this professor who's got some secrets. But somewhere along the way, it just started going in one ear out the other, and it just became a bore. The Epic Crush by Jeannie Lowe. This has been on my list for a really long time. It's touted to be a perfect book to pick up if you are a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and I think that's because she's supposed to like go and like fight demons or something like that. Maybe not even demons, just fight somebody. But it was honestly too strange, and I just could not connect to it. It felt too young. It felt silly. And it is, I hate saying that too. I hate being critical of it, because it is based off of a Chinese mythology of this monkey or something like that, but it did not remind me of Buffy whatsoever, and I just could not get into it. So the next one is Experimental Magic. This is Myrtlewood Mysteries Book 2 by Iris Beaglehole. At the beginning of the year, I had Kindle Unlimited, so I started checking out a lot of the Kindle Unlimited fantasies. There's so many, and the first book I fell in love with. It was so fun. Granted, it was not very well written. It did feel kind of like a rough draft, but it was really fun, and it totally reminded me of Gilmore Girls, and so I really just latched onto that and had a lot of fun with it. But then when I went into book 2, it just did not have the same vibes, and I think that the writing style, which really felt kind of rough, started to stand out to me more in that one. So I ended up not finishing it. The Forgotten Book. This was another one for Read It or Unhaul It, and I was really surprised that I didn't like this one, because I thought that this one was going to be the one that I really liked from the set, and it wasn't. This, I think it follows a girl who was like destined to marry this boy with the last name Dul, D-U-L. Well, his initials spell D-U-L, and she was just like, oh my god, he's so boring, and she wants adventure, and da-da-da-da-da. But I was just like, this story is boring, and so yeah, we didn't finish that. Then we have Hide by Kristen White, and I really wanted to like this so much because the idea of this horror story centered around a carnival, like, it really gets me, and I really want stories like that. And I might still have to go back and revisit this and try to like read the physical book just for one last hurrah, because you just don't know sometimes. But trying to listen to the audiobook, I just couldn't. It just, as much as I would just sit down and be like, going to listen to this book, I'm gonna clear my mind, and literally just be in one ear out the other. So I don't know, couldn't connect to it. So what I put on Goodreads was I couldn't connect to the story. I really wanted to, the games sounded really fun, but failing to hook me and grab my attention. Hide. A girl who hides, I guess that explains the lack of action. Oh, yeah, okay. So this is apparently what I wrote. I completely forgot, but apparently my past self who just finished this book wrote, hide. A girl who hides, I guess that explains the lack of action. Wait. There's basically what Katniss did too, but Hunger Games had a really strong setting and storyline. The author does a lot of retellings, and I wonder if that was her inspo. I don't know. Okay. Oh, that's right. So this carnival was supposed to have like games or something. Anyways. Maybe I won't revisit that one. Okay. The next one is a book called Into the Water by Paula Hawkins. And this one I forgot that I even gave it a try, but it was on the list. I trust that I clicked on it and put it on the shelf, because that takes like an effort to put it on the shelf. No, I'm just kidding. I remember this book. This book was just really confusing. And what I wrote on Goodreads was, I just don't really have time to read a book. That's probably not going to be anything more than mediocre for me. I'm really not enjoying the narrative style of this at all. We have a bunch of different character perspectives. It's kind of a mental challenge to kind of figure out who's even talking, what their relationship is, what their story is. But the most annoying character perspective is the one who is talking to, I think, is the dead girl. I don't freaking know. It feels really awkward and annoying, and I feel like it's trying to be atmospheric and lyrical or something, but it's just not working for me. All right, the next one is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and we're just going to jump to what I wrote on Goodreads. I made it to chapter 3 before I just couldn't take this book anymore. It is so stupid. I'm actually really shocked at just how stupid it was. A couple of things that had me just cringing so hard was the description of how hot this guy was. He smelled like money. And apparently she got the receipts on that $200 haircut. Doctors are filthy rich, I guess. The main chick is a business major, so she proceeds to purchase a building for this dream florist company without having a business plan at all. She's completely winging it as she's going, not knowing if it's going to fail. A completely impulsive purchase with her inheritance. All of her inheritance is dumped into this non-business plan. Then she decides to take the entire idea of a florist shop being this happy place because it's overdone, and she decides to flip it upside down and make it about anti-flower people. The funerals and death and dying. That's her thing for a flower shop, a funeral shop. She said that she loves gardening. Her name is Lily Bloom Rose, or something totally ironic. She's a complete idiot, and she probably wasn't very good at her degree program. The thing that really made me stop reading this book was when she sees Mr. Rooftop, when she says that Mr. Rooftop smells like money, has neurosurgeon's arms. But first she's like, hey, I know those arms, as if you can identify someone by their arms. I don't know. It sounded really awkward. He comes to the rescue when she twists her ankle immediately into this stitch they have going on, confessing all of their deepest secrets and impulsive thoughts. And he blurts out, I still want to F you. That's the exact same thing he said back in chapter 1. Only now we have an audience of all of their friends, and the dialogue is just terrible. It's horrible. I really don't know how these books rose to such popularity, except that people like to watch a train wreck. I do actually still want to watch the movie though, because good, I hope that they fixed all the dialogue issues for the movie. All right, the next one is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reed. I didn't care for the writing style. The beautiful writing was lost on me when it was disturbed by the crass, overly explicit graphic descriptions of sexual content, including masturbation, to illustrate feminism, which is ridiculous if that makes you a progressive feminist. I cannot understand feminism of today, seriously. Still associating women and sex, or freedom of choice in sex, I suppose is the idea, but really we're not breaking any molds, guys. FYI, do not understand how this book is so beloved. That's my thoughts on Juniper and Thorn. Oddly enough, her other book, something about drowning, I really liked. Okay, Edgar Cantero, I ended up DNFing 2 of his books. Meddling Kids, this is a book that I had on my shelf for a really long time, and it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo retelling. It sounded so good. And then the other one is This Body's Not Big Enough for the Two of Us, which made me think that it's kind kind of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of retelling, which it is. And I thought at first that it was an interesting concept how they decided to have these two people kind of living in one body. And I think like they also run like a crime fighting business and like a detective business or something like that. And I thought it was going to be so good. It's also characterized as being like macabre or whatever, but I really just can't get into the author's style of writing, and I'm just so annoyed. I got really annoyed with the overuse of explicitly sexual content that I felt was completely unnecessary. That seems to be a huge point where I lose interest with a lot of books. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. I read this for a while. I read a long bit of this book, but it just ended up getting really tedious. It's kind of supposed to be this reporter who goes to write up something on this old mystery, but then while he's there, there's starting to like see this other mystery come. I don't know. It's like a mystery within a mystery, and this reporter is supposed to be there learning about everybody who's involved to write something up about it. I thought that the most interesting part of it was kind of getting to know all these wacky townsfolk, but it honestly just got really tedious and it felt really out there. Again, you have this male perspective writer who there's just something about his headspace that was just kind of annoying after a while, and then it just seemed like he was trying to shock us by like specifically highlighting somebody who's a drag queen who's very flamboyant, and this character became a huge part of the storyline, and it's just like, look at all these crazy people, let's write about them. I don't know. It was like for shock factor, and I quit caring about the mystery at all. I figured we're never going to get here. We're just trying to look at all the freaks of the town or something like that. And I didn't really think that that was great. The next one is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, and I really wanted to like this so much. I feel like I have this very awkward relationship with Neil Gaiman works because like I love Coraline. It's so good, but then a lot of his other books kind of don't hit for me at all. But I felt this one's completely different, and so I really wanted to like this one. Alas, I felt that it was honestly just super boring. It seems to have everything that I'd ever want in a novel, but it just failed to grab my attention at all. Night Music by Jojo Moyes. This one I pretty much decided right away that it just wasn't going to be for me. I think in general, just the young adult contemporary kind of romance right off the bat, and then as I started to get into it, as I started to read, I could see that music was a very big feature theme, and I don't know why. It's one of those weird things that they just never seemed to be very interesting to me, so it also seemed like it was just going to be very typical and predictable young adult romance. So I think the entire reason that I even had that book on my shelf was because back when I like first started YouTube, I felt like I had seen a YouTuber that I admired rate that one really high and really like it, and so that's why I wanted to try it. And I'm definitely gonna have to do my own version of like BookTube made me read it. And Roseblood by A.G. Howard, and also Splintered by A.G. Howard. This author is just not the writer for me. She does young adult retellings, and I think Splintered is supposed to be a Alice in Wonderland retelling, and then Roseblood is like a Phantom of the Opera retelling. And I think, despite me not liking Splintered, I think that she did at least a better job with that one than she did with Roseblood. I felt that when we went into Roseblood, the author started to take just the very foundation of the story of the Phantom and completely change and alter the characters, and like introduces vampires and magic into it. And I felt that in a way it took away from one of the biggest and most important messages, and why the Phantom of the Opera is probably so notorious is because of the real message of the story. And I felt that because we decided to like explain away everything due to magic, we were taking away the fact of him being so lonely he went crazy. You know what I'm saying? And that just sat wrong with me. And I cannot say that the book actually finishes that story. I can't say for sure that that's exactly what the author did in this. So let me reiterate, I didn't make it that far, but that's how it started to feel like it was going. And I just was already over it. I didn't really care for the writing style. I didn't care for the characters or anything else really. But that was when I started to feel like we were alluding to that idea. Let's just explain it all away because of magic. I was like, no. But I did, because of this experience, I did figure out what makes a good retelling and a bad retelling. And for me, the difference of like, say, what is it? The Dark Something of Elizabeth Frankenstein. That one blew me away. It was incredible. It could be taken all by itself without the original story. And it was so, so good because you're not doing anything to change the original. What you're doing is expanding on it, taking a character that was introduced, or maybe a new character to give the characters more story. You're just seamlessly adding on to the story, not taking the foundation of the story and making it something different. So that is the big difference for me on, I think, going forward. I don't think that when it comes to retellings that I really am going to like. So yeah. All right. The Sea Witch by Sarah Henning. This was just a basic young adult fantasy, romance, whatever, that I just couldn't get into. Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I felt so disappointed by this. I had thought that this author was a favorite based off of a couple of books. That would be Mexican Gothic and Certain Dark Things. I read both of those and I loved them so much that she became an auto-buy author, 2 experiences. And since then, I read another book that I did really like too. It's actually, speaking of retelling, it is a retelling of Dr. Moreau's Island. I thought she did a really good job with that one. But the last couple of books that I finished reading, I didn't really like. You will see me talk about those on the most disappointing books of 2024. But this one, I was so over it that I just DNF'd this one. Honestly, the characters, I could not connect to them. I couldn't connect to the setting or the world or the story, anything. I just felt bored. And so I decided to call it Sky in the Deep by Adrienne Young. This is a young adult Viking story, and I feel really disappointed by how this author illustrates her idea of strong women. She goes around having her main character just hitting everyone. For the tiniest little things, she just goes around hitting people. And I'm just like, this makes you weak. This does not make you a strong woman. You know, within the Viking culture, you might be physically strong, headstrong, opinionated. That might check out in the Viking culture, but still hitting people left and right for no really good reason. And this isn't the first time that young adult books have really done this, that I have run into, and I have just decided that I am so sick of it. I'm just not even going to give them the time of day anymore. I'm not even going to try to make excuses and be like, well, it's just part of it, and we're just going to keep on pushing through because, the rest of the story is going to be good. No, stop. Stop making excuses. Authors, just stop it. Because honestly, I'm so sick of it. So being strong is holding back. It is showing control. It is outwitting someone or being more clever and calculated. Smart, not a brute. The next one I ended up DNFing was So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison, but this is merely on the list just because I really wanted to like it, but I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator's voice for the best friend was so grating on my nerves. It was so distracting. I couldn't even listen to the story because the narrator gave her this very high-pitched valley girl kind of persona in her voice, and it was just so insufferable. But this is a story that I want to read, and I'm going to check out the ebook of it eventually and try to read it via ebook, because I think that was the biggest problem with this one is just the narrator. But yeah, this is supposed to be a vampire story, so and I have been reading a lot of Rachel Harrison. I've read 3 Rachel Harrison books this year, and I've really liked all of them. So this one is merely on here just because the audiobook narrator. Special Topic in Calamity Physics by Marisha Pessel. Wow, I read this one towards the beginning of the year, and I was so salty about it. How bad it was. It started out being just way overly complicated, highly cerebral, pretentious, and these paragraphs or name dropping, which doesn't actually strike me as true intelligence. It's just showy, and it was so irritating, and it was distracting. I was like, when are we gonna get to the damn point here? We get it. You're smart. You looked in a Wikipedia and just name dropped all of these names, and what is the point of the story? And I just, yeah, it was so bad. And the bad thing is I have another book that's highly beloved by this author, Night Film. She also wrote the book called Night Film, which is a thriller, and I do really want to read that book. And I think it's going to be a completely different experience because it's supposed to be so much different than Special Topics and Calamity or whatever. But yeah, the next one is Star-Crossed by Minnie Dark, and I received an arc of this. I didn't get around to reading it. I had it on my shelf for so long. I have a really hard time getting rid of my arcs because I don't know, they feel like special books, you know? But I finally had decided to sit down and just give it all of my attention, and it didn't work. It is a romance with zodiac signs being a really big theme for motivations, and just knowing my tastes more, it was way too Hallmark for me. This is a term that I really like. I was actually talking to my hygienist about Colleen Hoover's book and why I didn't like it, and she was the one that said, oh, it's very Hallmark, and I was like, you know what, that is a perfect slogan. So yes, this one is another one that's just very Hallmark, and just the sheer size of this book, it seemed like way too much for what it was. It was not going to work for me, so I just DNF'd it. Starlings by Amanda Linsmeyer, and I don't remember this one exactly. I don't really remember what it was about. I think a book that I couldn't connect to, but it sounded really good. Okay, Alex E. Harrow. I have DNF'd this author. I will never read anything by this author again. I completed one book by this author, and then about the same time, I checked out like 3 other books. I'd put them on hold or something like that, and 2 of them were just because they were so tiny, and I was like, oh heck, those are quick books. And then the other one was because I needed a book with a month in the title, and I had a copy of the book on my shelf, and I was like, okay, cool. So the books are 10,000 Doors of January, A Spindle Splintered, and A Mirror Mended. Those last 2 are like a series together, but they're both like little novellas. Anyways, so again, I finished Starling House, which still suffered from the same issues that these other ones suffered. So this is just her writing style. She likes to write very flowery. But when I got into 10,000 Doors of January, I was so over it. Not only had I read one of her books already, but I also read another book that suffers from the exact same terrible, nonsensical writing called Caraval. And by then I was just so over it. The writing style is the whole problem with this book. It is so terrible. It's nonsensical. I cannot understand how readers think that her writing is beautiful when there is no sense to it. It's overly written, overly done, trying too hard to word vomit similes and metaphors and call it art. The plot is totally lost. It is very distracting. Caraval also employs this style. I managed to also finish that, but I just reached my quota on shitty writing. I will not read from either of these authors again. Okay, Together We Burn by Isabel Ibanez. This one was a gift from my husband, and then I also ended up receiving an ARC for this, which I graciously received. It's a beautiful copy too, so I kind of just want to hold on to it, but this started off strong, but then I just got to a point where I did not want to read it. I don't know why. I just couldn't. It wasn't doing it for me, I guess. I don't know. I just got to a point and I was just like, I'm going to read this book. No. I'm going to read this. No. I have other things to do. No, I don't want to read it. So I was like, it's time to just call it. After sitting in the midway point for like months, I'm not going to read this book. So I got rid of it. But the writing style is decent. And I am interested to know what people really think about the mixture of Spanish in the story. I actually do really like that, especially when it came to a book called Castle of the Cursed, which I liked this one. I have mixed feelings on this one, but one thing I felt that they did really well was mixing Spanish into the narrative style, and it did this very well. It made sense in a way, and I felt like in this book, Together We Burn, the Spanish was used almost to just make a point to the reader that this is a Spanish story, simply because the author tosses in Spanish language here and there. And I guess there were a few other things that really kind of made it feel like a Spanish novel. I don't feel like that was probably the best way to combine that. So I just think it could have been better done. Then we have Ironside Academy book 2, The Roarer. I don't know how to say that. Anyways, the first book was called Plie. That ended up as a guilty pleasure book. This was a Kindle Unlimited series. The first one was called Plie, and I cannot tell you how surprised I was by just how much I loved it. But when it came to book 2, it went in this direction that I could not follow. It just got really weird, and it got too made for a very, very specific harem fetish, or rather reverse harem. So this is a reverse harem, an alpha romance series. I didn't really know what that meant exactly, and I liked the first book so much that when I went into the second book and decided that it got too weird, it got too fetishy, then I took a step back and I researched what these were. So reverse harem is where there is a central female and all of these men are like in love with her, obsessed with her, would do anything for her. Not really my thing. Then it's also an alpha, so you have like your alpha, betas, and like they have these hierarchies and all that kind of thing. And she's like at the lowest totem pole, so she's like the biggest pushover essentially. So yeah, it just, like I said, it went to a place that I could not follow, and that's it. It got weird. So I'm just going to appreciate what Plie did and leave it at that. I don't need to continue on with the series. The next one, Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson. And this was supposed to be a really fun vampire story, but I really didn't care for the characters at all. I found it more annoying. What I wrote on Goodreads was, wow, just annoying. Geometric jawline, for one, overly ridiculous way to describe the crush who seems to be the main focus. Unfortunate side effects of heartbreak and magic. This was touted as a cozy fantasy, and it's super, super popular, and it sounds really fun. I was really disappointed to not like this book, but here's what I wrote on Goodreads. DNF'd at 40%. This book started strong with the food and the mixing of ingredients and little omens and rituals. All that stuff felt so practical magic, but something else was happening with the romance and the brother, and all of a sudden, and at a certain point, I was like, why am I not liking this book anymore? I thought maybe I needed to keep reading. But after reviewing what others were saying about the issues, I had to agree. The main character is weird. She makes weird decisions, like the dog incident and the deal with being pissed at her brother. She's like pissed off at him because he wants to move out. Like, most families separate and leave the nest at some point. You should be happy that they're happy. Whatever. I don't want to read another dud. All right, The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This was a book that I thought was going to be super good and super interesting, but did not. And I didn't really leave myself any notes as to why this didn't work, but I think that it just one of those times that it went in one ear and out the other. Witch of Wild Things. This I have not heard anyone talk about. I found it all by myself, and I was looking for like cozy, witchy, autumnal reads, and it took me by, I fell in love with the cover and I was like, this might be it. I figured since all the other ones that everyone says are really good are not working for me, let's try one that no one's talking about. So it's about witches, but it didn't take too long that this was not for me either. Apparently, I wrote on Goodreads, I just can't with this book anymore. It's too much, over the top, feminist piece. I'm over. I'm so over it. A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon. Now, I didn't expect anything super serious to come from this at all. It seemed really fun. I started to enjoy it. It just went way too far with the explicit content, and just, it really took me out of the vibes. And again, I am just so sick and tired of that. And I'm kind of thinking that at this point, I should probably work up a video essay about this issue that I have been running into time and time again this past year in particular. I kind of started to wonder if TikTok isn't like influencing authors to amp up the spice, that it seems like everyone wants the spice. Well, I don't, and I do know that there are some other readers that are just getting really fed up with it as well. I feel that it isn't needed, and I don't think that these explicit scenes need to be put in every single book. And if that's what I wanted, if that's what I was seeking out, then I would go look for erotica novels, or I would look for specific romance novels. But I almost wonder if the explosion of romantasy novels hasn't taken off too, because to call something a romance, it just just kind of has, for whatever reason, the romance genre has a negative connotation. So then comes romantasy, which is fantasy but with heavy romance. And I feel like now there's like not enough space for just plain fantasy. And it's not that fantasy doesn't include romance, but it's the fact that it seems like everything is now romantasy. In a way, it feels like it's being snuck into the books that without my consent, it's not telling me that it's going to be spicy. And I'm just like, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for a fun, witchy fantasy with a demon, and I'm being delivered a porno. So I'm sorry, but it's a really cheap trick, and it's easy to write boy meets girl, they bang, the end. It's harder and requires a lot more effort and more talent to actually write a romance that makes you cling to every interaction, every breath, every look, without them doing it at all. These are the romances that I live for. More often than not, once a character decides to be together, I'm like, okay, cool, what's next? I'm over this. I'm over their romance. I like all the build up to the point that, they get to be together. Okay, sorry for my little mini rant in the middle of there. I would really like to know some of y'all's opinions on what is happening. Are you falling into the same traps as me? Or maybe you really like it. I don't know. 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. I hauled this brick around for ages and finally attempted to read it this past year when the Game of Tomes book club decided to read it. And it is not good. It is boring. It's overly sexualized in the worst ways. Like a 15-year-old boy trying to look up a girl's skirt is what this is really vibing. There's obviously more to the story, but universally it seems like, especially from female readers, that we're all too distracted by this to get anything important out of the plot. Circle of Shadows. This was a book that was on my most anticipated new releases when the year that it came out, which was ages ago. So I completely forgotten about this book, and then I found a copy and added to my collection, and I was like, oh, I'm so excited to read this. But unfortunately it was poorly written, and I was kind of surprised by this. I could tell that it wasn't going to get any better, so we just called it DNF. The Reformed Vampire Support Group. This is a recent acquisition. I've kind of been on this kick collecting all of these vampire books that I think can relate to Buffy episodes or side characters from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You may or may not know, but I have kind of this series that I've been pairing books to episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely go check it out. It's kind of my baby right now, my baby project. So, but unfortunately, this one was pretty boring. It became a chore to even pick up, so I went ahead and sadly DNF this one. And we are coming to the very last book, and that is Spell Shop. This one is so popular, and for me, it started out really strong. It seemed like it was going to be the cozy fantasy, except with a little bit higher stakes, a little bit more plot line, but it didn't work for me after all. It was annoying. The main character being so antisocial, so reclusive. I mean, I guess real people are like that. I'm going through an antisocial period right now. Like, I don't even want to go to the grocery store. Like, that's how just being a homebody I am right now. But I really just did not like being in her headspace. It was really depressing and it was really annoying. And I feel like when you're going into a cozy fantasy, you want to feel happy and joyful, and being in her headspace was not. So I identify the antisocial as much as anyone else from time to time. And I also feel that the wonderful thing about writing is to help people who don't feel that way empathize with people who are that way, despite that. Well, the writer chose to repetitively mention how much she hated people instead of simply establishing it in the first time, instead of just establishing it at the first time, and then reflect her personality through her actions to match that. That would have been a better way to write her character. So it could have just been done better. Despite that irritation, I kept on. I mean, I wasn't exactly here for perfect writing. I was here for the witchy, colorful, small town vibes. And once the main character decided that she had to leave her home and venture into the town, it really felt like a cartoon. It felt like Halloween Town. And I know other people had said it's like Halloween Town, which in itself sounds like a good time, but when I actually was in it and was reading it, it felt way childish. And I know Halloween Town is childish, but I don't know, it just did not match for me. I anticipated, but it didn't end up being a good thing for me. I didn't care to see it through. I had already had so many issues that I believe, and I believe this is only like 3 chapters in, and I felt like I already had so many issues with this book, so I did not finish this one either. Anyways, that finally concludes everything that I put on my DNF shelf up until this point. We do still have 2 weeks of the year, but we'll leave it here for now. To tally up this list, that is 45 total books that I have DNF'd throughout the year. That is the highest number probably of any year where I'm just like, nope, not gonna work, nope. And that should seem like a negative thing, but I feel that it's really positive, that I am just weeding out books that would not serve me well, that would put me into a reading slump because I don't care for them, I don't like them. Why would I push myself through books that I'm not really going to like? Like, you should not do that to yourself. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I am very interested to know your thoughts, good or bad, I don't care. Let me know what you think. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.